And at the same time, I fulfill something that I'm here to fulfill on this planet Earth, which was to become a mother. It's part of what I needed to and chose to experience. And living in the moment with him, there is so much joy that I have never regretted one nanosecond of bringing him on this planet, because we are together and we're going to have conversations that allow him to see his purpose on this planet, and he gets to choose that purpose on his planet without my imposing. So my call as a parent in these times is to create the space for him to become himself and to know that his choices make up the moment that he's living in.
Aloha, I am Naomi Irons, and welcome to Conscious Parenting in a Time of Stolen Dreams podcast. A podcast that is a vision for what is possible for all our children on this planet at this time. It is a place where we are invited to become more than our histories, so that we might become expressions of human potential and the birthright that we all carry. It is meant to become a gateway for us to create a life-giving world as we dare to redefine ourselves beyond our own unchallenged and often unchecked self-imposed limitations that live buried in a lineage of stolen dreams. I have the pleasure of welcoming to the podcast Stela Murrizi. Stela and Dean Walker did a podcast a number of weeks ago, and I encourage you to go back and listen to that. And today, Stela and I will really be diving into the deep end of the pool in considerations around parenting in this new paradigm, as an old one really crumbles before our eyes, and the empowered space that we can live from as we choose to stay true to ourselves and internally referenced, which means really navigating from the inside out in a time where there are lots of facts and lots of things coming at us, to really take the pause and to connect in and to ask ourselves how else we might choose to live just today. So I will be welcoming Stela onto the podcast, and we will get started. Well, I want to welcome you back to the podcast, Stela. It is an absolute honor to have you join me today. And I really appreciated our brief email exchange this morning that was really about both of us just allowing this conversation to go wherever it needs to go. So what I would love to do is, first of all, I want to say Happy Earth Day, because I feel like that is going to get to flow into our conversation today. But I really want to turn it over to you, and I would love for you to share with me and with our listeners a bit about yourself and how you want to be known in the world. So over to you.
That's such a great question, and second time now, it kind of catches me off guard. How I want to be known. I guess the first thing that comes to my mind as right now was authenticity. I want to be known as who and what I am in this exact moment that we are speaking. There's a lot that's made up who I am in terms of the history and the background and all of that, that has shaped, that's led to this point in time. But really all that matters is right now. This is who and what I am in this moment. And that hopefully will come through in our conversation, and it's just going to unfold, and it's going to present itself. I'm going to present myself as I am in this moment. A little bit about my role in life and relevant to this conversation is that I am a new parent. My son is only 2.5 months old, and what's incredible is that I can feel the vibration of who and what he is in every unfolding moment, and he's letting us know more and more about himself, and that is the greatest gift on this planet. And my ability to be present with him really, I feel so so grateful to the work that Louise has put out there, to Sheila for finding me that very incredible day at Statistics Canada, to myself for showing up to all of the conversations, to you for having this conversation right now. It's just, it fills me with so much joy that I know I can be present for my son, and by being present for myself, and I get to experience the joy of all that is, and all that he is. Wow, that's not really about me, but it's not about how I want to be known. But I guess it to summarize a little bit, I suppose it's that I want to be known as someone that is present to the moment, and however that moment unfolds, it's beautiful. And yeah.
I think that's such a powerful place to begin, because what you and I are talking about today with the parenting conversation is parenting has been passed down from generation to generation, really mindlessly in so many ways, that we just go through our world, and we are beginning to wake up now with all the changes that are happening so rapidly on our planet right now, that we need to do things differently. And what I hear you speaking about is that it's from a place of being, that it's not the techniques and the strategies of parenting, that it is as we come to know ourselves deeper and with more intimacy, we get to share that, and we get to welcome that and invite that with our children. So I'd love to take a moment with you and really, really dive into a bit of your journey and what it means to become more than your history, and how that has informed your parenting already, in these brief, but I'm sure really expansive 2.5 months. What sparks in you as you consider that?
I really am filled with excitement and joy to not be confined to the habitual norms of parenting and living life altogether. There was a point in my life, believe it or not, where I, maybe 10 years ago, where I got pregnant, and it was, of course, quote unquote, an accident, but there are no accidents in the world. But and I chose not to become a parent at that time, because I was in a space where I felt that everything around me was crumbling. I was in such a negative place to be for myself, externalizing. I just didn't know any different. I didn't know a different way to live. I didn't know that depression and anxiety and addiction and all of these things were presenting themselves, or I was creating that situation for me to grow. I didn't know that. And to be quite honest, I'm grateful that I chose not to have a child at that time, because this is not how I would have raised that child. And I would have passed on all the, can I swear? All the bullshit that has been passed down intergenerationally. And it wasn't meant to be, I wasn't meant to create life at that time. Now, you know, through everything that I've been through in the last 10 years, and especially in the last 2 with Sheila and the Well Systems paradigm shift, I know that it is about being present. I know that I will raise a son who will be intimate with himself, because I will be present to myself in that particular way. It isn't about raising a son that's going to be a good citizen or successful or powerful or all of these things that now I've come to kind of equate with the cultural conditioning, the ego, the power tripping of the paradigm in the world that we live in, that really is there to self-perpetuate what it is perpetuating. So the institutions and the paradigms that disempower, I find. And that just tore me apart for many, many years. And it no longer lives in me the same way. Are there moments in time where I feel, you know, disconnected a little bit and I buy into that? Sure, there are. But they seem to last less and less with every passing moment. I know different. I know that at any point in life, I can connect to my breath. As Louise says, not as a technique, but as a reminder that I am alive in this moment. And nothing else matters. It is right now that matters. And I know, I trust with every fiber in my being that my son, as long as he remains connected to himself, as long as he remains connected to the animating signal of who he is, he will be okay. I don't need him to be a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist to prove to himself his worth. I've seen the destruction that that has on people. I've lived with that. And it is absolutely not a life goal for me. It is, my parenting is about the process of being present and deeply connected to myself, particularly in the challenging moments with my son and with myself, full well knowing that these are opportunities of growth. These are opportunities for deeper introspection, for deeper connectivity with myself. And it's very powerful. It's very powerful to live with no fears. We're limited anyways, because they definitely come up, right? They definitely. But just being here, being connected, being present, it's powerful. And that's my paradigm of parenting at the moment. This is the way that I choose to parent my son.
You know what occurs and what comes up for me, Stela, as I listen to you, is really your recognition of self-worth being a birthright. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I love that.
and you know, as I listen and I'm considering all kinds of things, because you know, you and I were raised in a time and in this world where our birthright was not something that was necessarily welcomed. You know, there was a lot, you know, of lineage, I think, that in being parented and in our parents being parented. And what I want to explore with you is when you hear that word birthright and you think about your own journey, and especially stepping into the Well Systems body of knowledge, which really is an invitation for us to explore becoming more than our histories and the birthright of human potential that we carry. So really what we're talking about is parenting now in a time where we are inviting and welcoming of a birthright of human potential in a time of complete collapse, you know, as earth systems, as human systems collapse. So for other people listening, can you share a little bit about your journey of what that has taken for you to really end a lineage, is what I hear you talking about. Ending a lineage of what no longer needs to come forward into the parenting with your son. And what that calls up and your presence to all of that.
Wow. For me, when I think about birthright from the paradigm of the past, it really is collapsing. It's small. It's so limited in allowing us to be what we are. And it does not serve me. It does not invite me to expand. And being almost a prisoner, confined, being kind of chained to these ideas of, you know, success looks like this, and if you're not, then it's like that, and all of these external pressures to be whatever fits in this box, but of course never quite fits because it's a box and it's not fluid. It's constrictive, and it's where most of us spend most of our time on this planet. And I feel so fortunate to have manifested Sheila in my life so that I can grow in this way and expand. That's what I associate with the Well Systems paradigms, expansion. It's this absolute, I feel massive. And I say this all the time to Sheila, like, these conversations make me feel massive. I can feel the, I don't know what the word is, but this like absolute mind-blowing expansion as a result of being in these conversations. And I truly hope that by being this way, my son will not become prisoner of the paradigms out there that constrict most of life. For me, birthright has come to be this: we are massive, we are enormous, we are powerful, we are creators, we are so much. And we have taken ourselves and we have made ourselves so small that fear, that guilt, that shame, that these compressing emotions have led to a world where we're literally destroying ourselves. And it's so evident, and it's so easy to get caught up in that. There's nothing I can do, when in fact, we are the creators. And the reclamation of that for myself, looking into the places and spaces where I created this world, I've grown. I have reclaimed and integrated those bits of me that up until now I hated. I hated so passionately that, I mean, I was addicted to, various types of substances and behaviors for a number of years. And it was a way to silence my soul. It was a way to stay smaller. And addiction runs in my family, as it runs in, I think, most families in today's day and age. And, I feel that by being in this way, my son won't experience this. He won't have a need or desire to. He'll know himself. He will know who he is. He will know what he is. And he will love himself, absolutely love himself, and be delighted to be in his own presence. And that's what parenting for the birthright of human potential means to me. And he is the next generation. So he is, the Lorax. So to me, there's a quote there. It's not about what it is, it's about what it can become. And I love that. I absolutely love that. We're standing in a moment in history. It feels unprecedented in my life anyway, where we can take a pause. In fact, we're forced into a pause. And we can, what can we become? How can we become what we are? How can we move away from the paradigms that have been so constricting and choose a different reality?
What I'm reminded of when you're speaking is, in the well systems body of knowledge, the logical levels of thinking, the code model, the models that allow us to see that right now we are standing at the precipice of our emerging future.
Mm.
And what I hear you talking about with your son is that he will know he has choice. I think that's one of the beautiful things about being a parent is really letting our children be their own wholeness, be who they are, and allow them the freedom for them to begin to recognize at such a young age that they have the freedom of choice, and that choice is creating and carving out their life. And so when I think about what you're speaking about and standing at that precipice, the choice to move fully into our emergence, fully into who we have the capability of becoming, is a choice, as is to curl back in on ourselves and lock ourselves back into our histories. That is also a choice. And the sensory cues, the experience that we have in our bodies, when we begin to pay attention, let us know that we are choosing each breath. And that each breath is this invitation to stand in the now and to know that we are not victims, that we are, as you were speaking about, powerful and intuitive, and that our children come with that birthright. Mm-hmm. And really, it's about creating that intimate but yet immense space for them to not have to forget. In a world that everything is driven and replicated and modeled to forget. And that's where acceptance comes in. That's where homogenized thinking and group mind share comes in. And I think what we're talking about is the exact opposite of the individual. The power is in the individual within the collective. And the choices that we're making in alignment with what feels right for us moment to moment. And that is anything than what we're taught. So what sparks in you as you
everything, everything gets sparked in me. It's just your way of capturing what I'm feeling inside. There's this connection there that I deeply identify with when you speak. It's just, I think I told you that on our last conversation, where there's like sparkles of excitement and joy moving through my body anyway. And that's how I know I've hit a jackpot in terms of the kind of conversation that I want to be having for expansion, for myself, for the world, for my son. What, when you said to not have to forget, to be so present in the cues of our body that we don't choose mindlessness, that we choose being present and being mindful to the moment and being aware, connected, all of those things, just being present, being ourselves, being intimate with ourselves, being connected to our breath. This is what life is about. This is what all other beings on this planet, this is how they live. It's moment to moment, breath to breath, however it looks for them, right? Like it's not gonna look the same, but that's how they are. They're present to the moment and they're more connected. Like if they get chased by a lion, they forget about it the next moment. It doesn't live with them. Whereas the systems that we have created seem to keep us confined, seem to keep us trapped in that space of fear, anxiety, depression, loathing, self-loathing. My God, the commercials and the targeting to make us feel small, it's unbelievable. And it no longer is the space that I choose to live in. I know my power as an individual. I know it viscerally. I know it through what I have lived and through what I have a connection to in this moment. And it is only deepening. It is only becoming more. So I'm very excited about like conversations like you're going to have with Ellie, I'm not sure her name. Great. So it is those kinds of conversations that I find empower me. And I only want and choose to live in that. And I know that if more of us chose this, if we weren't so afraid to let go, to just start chipping at the concrete, like, Louise said, if we just start chipping a little bit and see the cracks, and it will fall apart. It really will fall apart, and really quickly. This is what I'm baffled by, is how quickly things can fall apart. And of course, there's more layers. But to begin to notice, it's very quick. And as a metaphor for what's happening right now, let's say in Venice, where the waters became so clear because humans decided to stay indoors for a month. And I've been to Venice and the waters were anything but clear. And same thing, the ozone layers, and looking at China from space. The moment we just take a break, whether we see it in the earth recovering or we see it in ourselves, and we start to just notice the little bits and pieces that are like, that's not my voice. I choose not that. I choose a voice that enlivens me. I choose a conversation that speaks to my soul. The moment that we start to do that, I just find so much space opens up. And instead of concaving, we open up and expand and become more. Does that make sense? I feel like.
Oh, absolutely, Stella. And the image that comes to mind for me is what I call a core expansion. And it really is. It's like if we consider expansion beyond our bodies and our bodies being suspended in the energetic framework that is what you were talking about, the signal of self, the signal of who we are in this world, and parenting from that place. And let me back up a little bit to what you were saying a few minutes ago that I think is so crucially important. And that was your recognition of being heard and being seen, and what you described as being captured. I think that in the parenting conversation and how we can be with our children when we see them as magnificence, when we see them as the God force and expression in physical tissue, they come to see and recognize and know that as a way of being for themselves. And so it's this feedback loop that right now in the systems that are collapsing, the feedback loop is in the collapse. It's in the seeing ourselves from much lower levels of thinking inside of ourselves. Not lower as in worse, just we're seeking to bring this conversation up, and we're seeking for it to be expansive for ourselves, for our children, for this planet, for others. And the other thing that occurred to me as you were speaking is in Hawaii, where I have the privilege to live, they don't have a word in their Hawaiian language they don't have a word for nature because it doesn't exist outside of them. So I can hear in this parenting conversation, we are talking about the guardians for all potential. We're talking about the guardians that we are for ourselves, for our children, and also for this planet. And recognizing our children, they are the next generation. They are the leaders of themselves. And I think the more of us that know this as a sovereign truth, not that your truth and my truth have to map to each other, but there's space for all of it to be present. And that is very much how I parent my children, that my truth in my reality does not have to map to theirs. And I think that's so important, because I know when so many of us have been parented, reality was not positioned as a choice. It's, this is the world, this is how it works, and this is how we will continue to replicate it and create stronger and more stable systems. And so now that this is breaking down, we really get to see reality isn't as solid as we thought it was. And within that is the power to create what it is that has intimacy and meaning to us. And I think connection now, more than ever before, with our children is so important. People are asking me, how are your children through this really stressful time? And my children are incredibly happy. They are thriving. They know themselves to be creating their world, and they're awake to what is happening. I don't seek to shelter them from what is going on in the world, but we have very, very different conversations from this place where you and I are speaking from. And that allows, so I think I would love to, ask you the question, when you think of parenting for the birthright of potential in these times that appear to be collapsing and appear to be the end of something, what comes to mind for you?
You know, there was a time where parenting in this day and age seemed like, or bringing new life into this world seemed like wrong. And it was, I took about 2 years to make a decision with my husband to have our son. When I became more conscious of myself and what's going on around on the planet, it really hit me that, well, we don't have long on this planet. At least that's my belief about it. Based on what I see, what I hear, what, you know, the whole thing. It's my truth about it. And it is in flow. But in the moment, from what I witness, is that this is our chance. And I could have stayed in that collapsed space of, I cannot have children because what world will I be bringing them into? And instead I chose the path of my soul. This is the only way I know how to describe it. It's that I love being a mother to my son. I absolutely adore it. And through him and through other people, but in terms of the new generation, it is through him that I can have different conversations. And at the same time, I fulfill something that I'm here to fulfill on this planet Earth, which was to become a mother. It's part of what I needed to and chose to experience. And living in the moment with him, there is so much joy that I have never regretted one nanosecond of bringing him on this planet, because we are together and we're going to have conversations that allow him to see his purpose on this planet, and he gets to choose that purpose on his planet without my imposing. So my call as a parent in these times is to create the space for him to become himself and to know that his choices make up the moment that he's living in. And he will know how to make expansive choices, just like your children do. And you are, you know, hashtag parenting goals for me, because you are so connected to yourself and you allow your children to just be. And, you know, I haven't made any decisions about where or if my child will go to school, or I don't know. I don't know what that version of me and that version of him is going to require. I don't know today, right now. Right now, I know that I am home with him and I am present with him. And this pandemic has led to a situation where my husband is also home with me, and our life is honestly perfect. I miss, you know, my family. I miss physically going to see people, and I take this as a blessing, both at my individual level and collectively, in terms of, you know, the great pause, as I've heard some people call it. Another thing was the core expansion. I love that both as a meditation and as a way of being, as a reminder that although I can touch myself and I cannot touch the energetic signal of self, I cannot touch that physically, but I can access it. I can access it through meditation. And I honestly feel that people who don't meditate are wasting their lives away. It's just, it is so critical to our own self-evolution to be able to close our eyes and just be. I'm not sure why I was holding my breath just there, but I did, and I noticed that. And take a breath. I also really liked what you had to say in terms of teaching them to be leaders of themselves, to be the leader self that they are, to not hang on to any notion as fixed, to understand that truth is fluid and it does shift in every moment. And just because you believe something to be true now does not mean that you have to hang on to that and defend it with dear life. I've heard Sheila say, you know, dying to be right. And I see that. I see people manifesting all kinds of disease, insisting that their way of life is the way of life. And I just feel saddened for them. I feel the loss of potential. I feel the loss of spirit that once was. That these beautiful people born into this planet with all these possibilities of knowing how massive and expansive they are, shattered. And you see that in their bodies, you see that in their demeanor, and it's heartbreaking. And the lack of reclamation of self, it wasn't for me. It was, I either will live fully or alive, or I will die. And you know, that's okay. But I wasn't willing to live in such a way that my spirit was crushed continuously. And by doing so, I believe that I model to my son and to other people who are willing to listen and who are in that vibratory field, if you will, and can hear that message and are open and receptive to that message. I'm hoping that they too will choose that. And knowing how powerful indeed the collapsing systems are, and yet continuously self-sustaining. Honestly, I'm not holding my breath. And I hold no hope for the collective per se, and at the same time, I know the power in the individual. So where that's going to lead to, who knows? But it is a space where we can create differently. This is a space where we can choose to be different.
Stuck with me as you were speaking was the word imposed.
Mm.
And I think as children, there's been so much that has been imposed on us. And as we grow up, we begin to stop recognizing that we are now the we now self-impose. So we self-impose our own limitations and our own restrictions. And I think what you just modeled in this podcast with all of us, in the moment that you caught yourself holding your breath. Because I think, Stella, that's what it takes. I think it takes deepening our awareness with ourselves, so that it's not that I live a perfect life and I am a spiritual, entity that only moves with grace and with ease. It's that the power is in recognizing the magnificence of my imperfection, recognizing that, there are moments I forget who I am. There are moments that I stop breathing. There are moments where I'm at the edge, taking myself to the edge of my own next self-imposed limitation. And that I can create such compassion for myself. And I think that as a way of being in parenting is so powerful, that we can recognize our children in the magnificence of their imperfection, in recognizing it is their journey, it is their choice. And I can only keep coming back to, my journey of awakening really was invited by my children. Like, they have been and continue to be such powerful invitations, because I grew up with, not always having awareness of my inner state, of my own perceptions. They now get to be this incredible invitation for me when I forget. And so a lot of times when I see what I see in my children in their states, instead of going into creating a technique or a strategy or looking to or seek to fix that, I go inward first. I check in, am I breathing? Am I going to react from a place of my history, or am I going to respond from a place of compassion and hold space for them to expand into themselves? And what I've noticed, and what I will share, with this whole quarantine and this great pause, is that sometimes with no content in my children's life, there will be this immense experience inside of them that is seeking to be freed. Whether it's tears, whether it's anger, whether it's, whatever the sensation is, but it's always my moment to check in with myself. And I think parenting from what we're calling a new paradigm, and I love that, because it creates a distinction that there is parenting from an old paradigm, and it's what most of us have grown up being parented by. And to now make a conscious shift isn't just, there we go, I've made the conscious shift. It is every breath that I take, I am choosing. Every breath that I am interacting, especially in intense moments, that the world is intense right now. There is an intensity that when that presents for my children, I get to remember who I am first. I get to take the pause for myself and ask myself, am I breathing? And it makes all the difference in the world, because then I don't go into a fear response or a collapsed state, trying to parent from a collapsed state. It's kind of like trying to parent and be a school teacher right now for kids that are at a school. It's like, this isn't a time to seek to create what is normal. This is a time to pause and to really look at, if I am the change that I want, that I seek. So if I am that, to stop and to just to be with my children right now is such an invitation.
And what a great joy I would have thought this would be for most people, right? Like, you have the opportunity to just be with the people that are presumably most significant in your life. I find that such a blessing. It's such a blessing if we're willing to see it as such. And I have a lot of friends who are quite overwhelmed with what's going on, precisely because they're trying to be the teacher, they're trying to be the daycare, they're trying to stimulate their children in the same way, and they're exhausted. And this is, in my perspective, as parenting from that old paradigm that we're talking about. It's trying to keep things normal when they are not normal in any way. And truth be told, even the normal that has been is not self-sustainable because it isn't expansive. So for me, you see so much stuff, and it's just like everything is amazing. Anyway, we do live in a world that is incredibly intense, and choosing to bring a new life on this planet took a lot, I believe, courage. And I know it calls for me to be incredibly resourceful at the intensity of what's happening. I will need to be so present to myself, because I believe things are going to get worse before they get better. And this is our calling in the moment, is when things are intense, whatever that looks like. So for me, a lot of my life, it's looked like, anger, depression, anxiety, all that sort of stuff. Now I no longer need that label. I am not an angry person. I am not a depressed person. I am having an experience in the moment in my body that is triggering a response. And that response may feel, quote unquote, negative or intense. And that's exactly what I call upon, is I'm having an intense experience. Breathe. Am I breathing? Is my attention in my body? At the base of my spine, are my shoulders relaxed? Am I breathing? That whole thing about staying present so that the signal moves, so that the wave moves, so that that message moves through my body rather than stagnates in whichever space it's going to stagnate. For most of my life, it stagnated, well, pretty much everywhere, but, in my belly, I had what one might call IBS for many, many years, because that's where it would not flow. Just I would hold on and it would stay there. So of course, body being the final frontier, it manifested in that space. And I know that now it does not have to. I conceptualize even disease as a message to myself to pay attention. And this is exactly how I see this COVID-19 situation, as a message of slow down and pay attention, never mind normal. Normal wasn't working. And I truly feel that if we ask people, is normal working? Their initial gut feeling will say no, but there'll be a but there that follows. Enter all the reasons why we must save the economy, enter all the reasons why we must go back to normal, instead of pause, rethink normal, like rethink what made us believe that we are matter, rethink what made us believe that we're merely flesh. What made the separation an agreement between two white powerful guys, one a scientist and one a pope, saying, I'll deal with the science and the medicine and you deal with the religion, and we won't allow those to intertwine. They're separate. what makes them separate? I mean, quantum physics has been around like 100 years, and we still don't know the basics. So do I think that that is conscious on the part of whoever it is that benefits from sustaining the status quo? Yes. Yes, including our school system, right? Like, why did I go through, I don't know how many years I spent in school, good God, my entire life, not knowing about quantum physics? And yet I know about Newtonian physics. So it's just interesting. Just to bring it back to myself, I love this concept of checking inward first. The intensity of what presents for me is also an invitation to breathe, to notice what are my triggers right now. And in that way, I just hopefully don't pass them on to the next generation. Hopefully, by taking a pause, by noticing what's happening within myself, it's an invitation to my son to do the same. It's an invitation to whoever is around me to do the same. I mean, so much wisdom comes in that moment of pause. So it's a blessing. It's an absolute blessing. And I choose not to be distracted.
I think that's such an important distinction, like that pause. I mean, we can use this pause for all kinds of things, but to mindfully not distract ourselves. And, you know, I really, when I think of the old paradigm and I think of, you know, what is in collapse, and I can almost hear the questions of like, well, how do I free myself of that? Like something that I've been a part of my entire life, you know, when I consider others that are listening to this. And what occurs to me immediately, and I think of the model in Well Systems that's called the code model, creation out of deep energy. And it really captures the essence of what you're talking about, rethinking. So at a level of thought, which is what we know to be energy, and at the level of the body, which is the densest form of thought, when we bring those two together, we really get to see that the body is a messenger, that the body is a biological messenger of a thought pattern that either keeps us locked into our history or it frees us into much bigger questions. And I know for me, my awakening and my continued awakening is to continue to question and to continue to, you know, I had the image when you were talking about the Pope and the scientist of the whole idea of schooling, the whole idea, and I'm talking about the deep roots of it, is really about here's the information you need to know so that questioning doesn't happen outside of that box. So what happens when we begin to question outside the box? You know, I've been willing to take myself lately in all kinds of fabulous places that really are looking at the deep state. And, you know, and I can get sucked into it out here. And I loved your invitation of when I bring it back to myself, I have access to my own deep state. And what are the patterns and that are running in my own life that keep a reality that no longer holds meaning on this planet alive. And to continue for that to keep going, especially as we start to come out of this pause, I think will create a lot of chaos and a lot of experiences for people that could be looking for the norm. And what you and I are talking about is actually looking beyond the norm and questioning everything and noticing what is our truth about it. And I think that's the power of really stopping to take a look at our histories, like we do in the decloaking and engaging experience, to actually stop running and stop distracting ourselves from a much deeper inner state that we carry. And you and I both know that when we free ourselves to that, that's where human potential lives. It doesn't live in the glossing over of what has come. It really is, I'm going to move forward. And as my history presents, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to reclaim myself in that, and I'm going to move forward. So thank you for all that you shared, because I think it's important for us to be the permission for ourselves, each other, and others to question.
Mm-hmm.
And for my children, they have the freedom and the permission to question everything and everybody. You know, there's a lot happening, you know, in my hometown right now in Nova Scotia, a mass murder that has over 22 people killed, you know, happened over the weekend. And that called up a lot for me. You know, that was a perfect invitation for me, as awake as I am and as aware that I am, to know that the traumatic experiences that are held in the tissue of my flesh, it's never time until it's time. And the trigger of that event, I know for myself and many, many others, I feel so incredibly fortunate because I know I have a choice. I know that I can go inward and I can trust the truth of my experience, and I can let it ripple, you know, as this wave of light through my body that transforms rather than curls me back in on myself. So I think that is the invitation in parenting as well. The more that we free ourselves, the more that we can be present for our children in whatever surfaces for them. If not, I'm going to be pushing that away. I'm going to be looking to distract them with something else. I'm going to be looking to, not consciously, completely unconscious. So the more conscious I become, the more I am parenting from that place. And their dreams, instead of being stolen, which is the whole name of this podcast, they get to be created, and they get to become a living expression in their world.
So I'm guessing in your household, because I said so, doesn't really happen, does it?
It can be, oh my goodness, it's hard to say this in Hawaii, but I remember when they were little and I would say, it's cold outside, you know, you have to wear a jacket. And my daughter would look at me and she'd say, Mom, I don't feel cold. And that moment of habituation of my, you know, being told to go put warm clothes on, and just really realizing like they're not at danger. So for them to be empowered to go out and see if they get cold, and then to make a different choice. It's what you were talking about earlier. For my children, and really this goes so far beyond, the reason that I'm so passionate about having this podcast is this is a vision for all children on the planet. But what I know is that for children to become the greatest, most magnificent versions of themselves, the parenting conversation has to be had, because that is the environment that we are steeped in. And it can be tough. It can be really, really uncomfortable and tough at times when experiences begin to move in our body and we begin to recognize perhaps the way that I've been considering parenting isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not inviting the greatest human potential at this time. And to be willing to stay in those conversations and not look away. And to be willing to have a different process, not one that defines us, but one that we come to define ourselves through, I think is essential for moving forward. So as as we begin to bring this to a close today, what are some of your final thoughts around the continuation of this, what feels like boundless conversation?
It definitely is boundless from where I stand, and it is constantly evolving, and it is incredibly powerful. And just before we got on this call, I was in a chat with Sheila Winter-Wallace about a resourcefulness conversation. She gathers women, and anyway, the question that she asked is, what's most important to you about being alive in this moment? And for me, perhaps I was primed because we were about to do this conversation and because all I think about is my son. For me, it's parenting, shifting the paradigm of how we think about parenting so that we are not trapped in paradigms that make us feel small and powerless, but instead shift to paradigms where we trust ourselves, where we are so connected to the root of who, at least, we are, and then what we are, so that we can make choices that teach our children to trust their own selves. Like you said, with something as simple as put on a jacket, it's cold, but I don't feel cold. It's that imposition of, well, you should be cold, and I know better as a parent, so therefore do this. And it doesn't allow that expansion, doesn't allow, and I really like that. Just, okay, test it out for yourself. Get your feet wet and see what happens. I am here to talk about it. I am here open, honest, direct, generous, vulnerable. I'm willing to speak with you on a level that allows both of us to grow. And I want not to keep you small so that I can contain you in a box where I can control you. I have no desire to control my son. Maybe he hasn't hit his, whatever people talk about, tantrum twos or whatever, I don't know. But that is precisely an invitation for me to become more. So I'm really looking forward to how he's going to grow and how he's going to challenge me in ways that I can become more for myself and therefore create the space for him to do that. I resonate with this word, chaos. Gleason had a fantastic article on that. And it is in chaos where we are called to become more. When we're comfortable, why would we want things to change, right? It's all right. It's not great, but it's all right. So it's kind of working for me. I'm just going to hang out here and see what happens. And then we spend a lifetime seeking something that we cannot pinpoint what it is that's missing. And there's this thing that's missing. or at least that's what it feels like. And even though our lives are kind of, by all external standards, good, there's a calling inside that's just nagging. And a lot of people live in that space. And I am so grateful to the chaos that I created in my life in the last, decade or whatever it has been, that it allowed me to start chipping at the concrete. It allowed me to start having different conversations about myself and the world that I live in and what I believe, and just start questioning, well, why do I believe that? And where can I go from exactly this moment? And the power comes from self-defining that, from self-defining my truth, from self-defining what it means to me to be alive. And it's massive. And I seek no desire to go back to normal or to status quo or to any such thing. I only seek to expand. I only seek to become more and to continue manifesting a life that works for me. And since this has happened, I've become more creative. I've become more in touch with myself. Enter artwork. I'd stopped painting most of my life, and it's a hobby. It's a place where I get to express the state of my being. And just kind of realizing I live a fantastic life. I live a fantastic life because I choose that. And I feel empowered every moment of every day. I feel empowered to become more. And I thank you for creating the space that we can have such a conversation where I get to discover more about myself. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversations.
Me too. And I think that's such a powerful place for us to bring this to an end. The confusion, the chaos, redefining that for ourselves, that is a further awakening, that is, the becoming a part of things that we've coupled together that no longer serve us moving forward. One of the big things that I had coupled for myself was love and responsibility. And when I uncoupled, so when those two started to come apart, of course, the chaos and the confusion inside of me of really stepping into a whole new emergence of myself. And that what I hear you talking about is this doesn't end. Like this conversation doesn't end here. And that our commitment to ongoing personal discovery, growth, expansion, evolution, in so many ways, I consider myself an activist for conscious evolution, and that really requires, it begins with me. It begins with having the conversation and being willing to ask the questions that invite the next layer of my own chaos and confusion, and to ground that into the safety in my body. Without safety, that is the foundation to all of these conversations, is safety resides inside of me. That is where the vulnerability and the next discovery lives, is because I feel safe, or I'm on the next edge of a greater safety. So thank you, Stela, for being so willing to stand in your power and your vulnerability, in your immensity and your expansion, unapologetically. I think that is what this is going to take, moving forward as a growing movement of There are those of us putting up our hand and going, we're choosing to live in a very different paradigm. And it's one of our choosing. And I think that as things become more chaotic in the world out there, it's going to be important to really pay attention to what signal is directing us. Is it that signal of external validation or external facts that then drive fear? Or is it the signal of ourselves that is directing tissue?
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole other conversation, but I think ending there is perfect. So I really encourage, and on the show notes, I'll have a link to your website, to your blog. Because what really stood out for me was the first paragraph in your about section when you said, I am divine.
If I could just say just a small thing for people who have listened so far, it's that it is really truly time to reconsider the way that we've been living life. It is such a great opportunity to know that we are creating every moment of every day. So this is an invitation to make a different choice, even if it's just one little choice today, right now. What is it that you can do for yourself that's expansive? Whereas you would have chosen collapse, instead choose expansion, whatever that means in the moment, right? And who am I to say? But I just feel like that's what I'd like to leave people with. It's just make a choice that expands you. Just one. See what happens.
That is perfect. I look forward to many more, Stela.
Oh, thank you so much for this. This was incredible.
Until the next time.
Absolutely. Bye.